fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong live stream and podcast. My name is Rich Natoli. I'm flying solo tonight without the co-host, Ed. Ed is getting ready for a fishing trip coming up. Hopefully we'll be getting together on Wednesday. We're going to be out for striped bass. It's that time of the year and we've got a weather window. So hopefully most of you watching will have a weather window opening up as well. We'll get rid of this terrible wind that has just been killing the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And actually, it's been killing Florida and Texas as well. Man, we've got to find an end to it because the striped bass are running through. They're running through New Jersey. They're running through Maryland. The Chesapeake is alive. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So we have on tonight one of the captains that puts out weekly reports within the Salt Strong Insider Club. And we're going to go through talking about where she fishes in the Upper Chesapeake Bay. So we have Captain Kayla Haile coming on in just a moment. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this one. And we've got people from all over. So just want to recognize we've got, sorry, it's tough to see this, Minis and Fishies. We've got Larry M, CD, James Flynn, Bill D, MR Johnson, Tad, Antonio, I Feel Fishy, John Hutchinson, Heaven and L. We've got people from all over the place. Participation Trophy Fishing, The Fisherman, and Billy Ackerman. So those are the ones that we can see so far in the chat. We can see there are a lot more people viewing. So thank you to everybody for tuning in. This is going to be a fun one. And we're really going to go through. I mean, if you're fishing the Chesapeake, you got a little bit of time left to get on these striped bass before they kind of shut down all over the place. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that because I'll be honest, I fished the Chesapeake and it's one of those places that just scares me. It scares me because I never know what the regulations are. They're confusing. It's almost, if not, well, maybe it's even worse than New York State. New York State, I was telling Captain Kayla just before we started, I talked to two guys that worked with the fishing game, whatever they're called up there. And I asked, can I target striped bass or is it illegal right now in this area? And the one guy said, yeah, absolutely. As long as you catch it and release it. Talked to another guy and he said, absolutely not. I'll give you a ticket. So, and he didn't seem concerned. I said, well, the other guy said I could, and he didn't seem to care about that. So it's very confusing. I guess it's also confusing for some of the fishing game folks. But one thing that we do know is there are areas within the Chesapeake Bay and tributaries and rivers that you can catch these striped bass. And what's even more important, the fish down there are going to be moving and behaving in a similar fashion to those that are up on the coast, the tidal rivers in New Jersey, Connecticut, wherever you are, you're going to be able to kind of mimic this. Now, you may be a couple of weeks behind based on the water temperature. Maybe in Connecticut, you have to wait another 2, 3, 4 weeks for this to happen, for what we're going to talk about tonight to kick in. But it will. And the fish are going to behave the same or very similarly based on the conditions. So that's what we're going to go through tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Captain Kayla Haile. Welcome to the stream.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Rich.
It's good to see you. So River Queen Guide Service is the business. You want to give everybody a little sense of what the guide service is, where it's located, and how they can find you online?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm Captain Kayla. And I am the owner and founder of River Queen Guide Service. I started guiding about 4 years ago on the Upper Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. So what I consider the Upper Chesapeake Bay is from the Chesapeake Bay Bridge north and basically all of its tributaries north. So I started guiding about 4 years ago, and I have grown up on the water fishing with my dad and my brother. And I've always had a passion for wanting to share what I have learned over the years with other anglers, especially female anglers. And getting their kids out and just being able to share my passion with others, whether it be if we're catching fish or if it's just the scenery or where we're fishing, just getting people comfortable with their gear and just being in the outdoors.
Well, so that's what makes you the perfect type of guest for Salt Strong, because as you know, being involved with the community, the Insider Club, that's what we're all about. It's about helping people to get on more fish, catch more fish, less time, have better experiences, create memories with the family. And I will also say, as an aside, Kayla, we do have quite a large number of female fishermen that watch this and also have been guests in the past. So we have actually in the chat right now, we have one of them, Heaven and Elle. I think I saw her in there. She fishes out of New Jersey. And if I remember correctly, she just got a boat, so she's going to be all over the place. She was land based the last couple of years. Boat, so
nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. For a long time I've always been feeling like I'm kind of the only one. I mean, as far as I know, on the Upper Chesapeake Bay, I am the only female guide. But as for just being a female angler in general, for a long time, I have felt, kind of alone out there. And really ever since COVID hit, and fishing was kind of one of the only things we could do during that period, I really noticed an outreach of more female anglers, with questions, where to go, different shoreline access. Ton of people bought kayaks. So it's really great to see a lot of other female anglers out there and, doing the things I'm doing. I love it,
Yeah.
It doesn't make me feel so alone.
Right. Well, I know that I interact with a lot of female anglers, basically through the live stream and the podcast. We have many. If you go on Facebook and I post something, there's a group of women that go in and they follow the show. They don't talk a lot in chat or anything. A lot of them just listen to it on the podcast. So it's not live, but I've interacted with many of them out on the water, so I'm just in my kayak and it's pretty easy to see the big fat guy in the blue kayak coming by. So they just pull up and they say, "Hey," and they call me by my YouTube name. So they Fat Dad. Like, "You Fat Dad?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Like, we listen. I was like, "That's awesome." And the one Rhonda that I was talking to last year, she said, "Yeah, we listened to you on the way down here today." So they were towing the boat down and they were listening to it. So definitely a lot more women. And maybe that's one positive we can take out of COVID, is that I do think a lot more men got involved or got back into the sport, but a lot of women are coming into this sport.
Right. And I definitely think a lot of the husbands and wife duos, it was something they could do together during that time. And it's really great to see the entire family really just being out on the water.
Yes.
I love it.
I agree. My wife just told me that she wants to get a fishing kayak.
Nice.
Go. She's like, "I'm not going to fish all day with you, but if I can go out and fish for a while, because I'll go out 8 to 12 hours, depending on what time of year it is." And, she's like, "Maybe I could do 2 to 3 hours." I was like, "That's fine with me."
Right.
Absolutely. Now I have to go buy another kayak. That's the one thing. It's like, oh, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt a little bit. So I want to jump in and I want to go through the first question that we got. We actually got it within the Insider community today from one of our members. And the question, well, it wasn't really a question. It was just pretty much a statement saying, "I need to know what she caught that striped bass on in the thumbnail of this video, because that is a beautiful bass." So do you want to kind of go through the story of that fish?
Sure. So I caught that fish, not this past spring, but the spring before. And it was right around this week. I know it was near my brother's birthday. So my brother's birthday is this coming Sunday on the 26th. And I know it was either right before that or right after, because he was the one that took that picture. And this time of year, bless my mother, how she had my little brother during this time while my dad was out fishing, anyway, that's another story I'll save for later.
Yeah.
But he was with me when I caught that fish, so I know it was around his birthday. And where I caught that fish was in the lower part of the Susquehanna River. And that's primarily where I do a lot of my big, striped bass fishing in the spring. And what the majority of the people do there, we have such a small area to fish. If I had to guess, it's probably about a 3 to 4 mile range that all of these people try to fish in. And the best approach that we use up there is, some people call it trolling. I call it dragging, because when you think of trolling, you think of like the big umbrella rigs and the big spreads with the planer boards and all that stuff. This is totally different. I call it dragging because basically all we're doing is I hold the rod in my hand while I drive the boat, and we're trolling, dragging different kinds of plugs. So deep diving plugs, X wraps, shad wraps, Yozuri plugs. Some people troll, rubber paddle tails.
Right. Like me.
Yes.
That's what I do. Yeah.
So, in a way, yes, it's trolling. And we're trolling at a very slow speed with the river. Depending on what the river current is, it depends on the speed, depends on which lure you want to do, because with the river current also affects the river level. So when you don't have a high river current, you have a lower level. So you don't want to be trolling, 8 to 10 foot deep dive and plugs. You want to troll those shallower, 4 to 6 foot plugs.
Right.
So that's kind of how I caught that fish. That day it was super windy, super cold, per usual here in Maryland anymore. If it's not windy, it's pouring down rain. But
right.
Yeah, you can kind of see in the background the way, it was pretty rocky out there. But yeah, I just was using I think it was an X-Wrap plug, nothing special to it. And you kind of just have to follow the crowd up there. I mean, everybody trolls basically from, upriver against the current. You can do different zigzags and different paths, and you just got to watch all the other people. Because like I said, we're in such a tight area that we're fishing. You get 8 to 10 boats out there, plus people on kayaks come out and do it too.
Right.
It can get crowded fast.
So actually you answered the one. When you're doing this dragging, are you going specific? So you said you go across and zigzag, you go against the current. Do you go with the current as well?
I don't go with the current. Just, I think personally that when you're doing that, I can't slow my boat down enough to go with the current. And the current there, it's so fast. I mean, it doesn't visually look fast, but it's moving pretty quick. So with these fish being as lethargic as they are this time of year, with the cold water and everything, the slower the speed, I personally think the better. That way you can basically, what you're doing is just feeding these fish the bait. You're not, they're not being super aggressive. They don't see it and all of a sudden want to dart over to it. You literally have to swing it in front of their face. That's
an interesting thought. And the one thing that I was thinking is you probably wouldn't go with the current simply because if you're using an X-Wrap, you're going to lose the action unless you're going faster than the current.
Right.
Which is just a difficult thing. It's great to go with the current. See, normally people say, well, should I cast against the current, across the current, and sweep or with the current? And the answer is, if you're in one spot, cast it up into the current and retrieve with the current, because that's typically the way that they're facing. But if you're dragging, you can't do that.
Right. And sometimes, if you do fish with the current, you're just moving too fast. You can't get the right approach and the right technique down to present the bait that, to the fish. It just doesn't look natural to them.
Right. We actually have a couple of questions coming in already. So I want to, first, I do want to recognize the person that is watching from the furthest distance from us right now. So the fisherman is tuning in from Australia. So hello,
Wow.
fishermen. It's good to see you. Welcome to the stream. That's awesome. So I don't think they have striped bass there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I've encountered.
If they do, I want to go.
I know. Well, yeah, wouldn't that be great? First you have to catch them on the West Coast, East Coast.
True.
And then I'm actually thinking I might be out in California later this year, and I might want to try to get one just so I can say I have. I have this thing in my head that I need to catch a fish on every ocean. I know it'll never happen. So I have, or on each side of the ocean. So I have both sides of the Atlantic covered, and that's it.
Yeah, I have a slightly smaller bucket list. I just want to catch a striped bass in every region that they're known to go to. So I can mark a couple off my bucket list. I've caught a couple, up the East Coast, but I want to go to like Tennessee and California and yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can get a big Salt Strong trip together and we can get people from all over and we'll just start checking them off the list.
Sounds good.
I think that would be good. I want to show this question. So this one is from someone local to you. So from Maryland, MR Johnson, what are your thoughts on the blue catfish having an effect on striped bass fishing? This is a big topic. What are your thoughts on that?
This is a great question. And my thoughts are, I think probably like yours and a lot of other fishermen out there, these blue cats are a huge problem. Huge problem. Actually, this past weekend I went to a CCA. That's the Coastal Conservation Association. I went to a banquet that they hosted on Saturday, and the blue catfish were a huge topic of discussion there. They all recognize, that these blue cats are a problem. For a while, I think it was being blamed on the snakeheads.
Yes.
Which I honestly have to 100% disagree with everybody who thinks that the snakeheads are doing more problems than what these blue cats are doing. Surprisingly, we've actually caught a couple blue cats this year trolling up in the Chesapeake Bay or up, the Susquehanna where I fish, thinking, hey, we got this giant 35, 40 pound striped bass on till we get it to the boat and it's a 30, 35 pound blue cat. We're like, what the hell? And these things are hitting lures. They're super aggressive. Like we'll catch them in the fall, in the dead of summer. So I think the blue cats are a huge problem in the Chesapeake Bay. And I hope the bow fishermen up there, like I know there's a bunch of bow fishermen that do quite the wipeout of some blue cats and keep them coming, in my opinion. Yeah,
you hear a bunch of rivers that are just being destroyed. You have the James River was just brought up this week inside the community, the conversation about the catfish that are in there. So how did they end up getting there is the question.
To be honest, I'm not quite sure how the blue cats came into the bay. All I know is that they grow super, super fast and they multiply super, super fast. And unfortunately, catfish have such a bad reputation with like the way they taste, the way they, cook them or whatever. I personally haven't had blue cat. I've had channel cat and flatheads, and they tasted pretty good to me. So I don't see why blue cats would be any different. But, people think, oh, catfishing, it's, what's so special about it? But I've heard, like I said, we've caught a couple blue cats this past spring, and they fight just as hard as these striped bass do. And they'll trick us all the way till we get it to the boat. And we're like,
well, and they can go up to what, like 100 pounds or so?
Yeah. Well, yeah, they get huge. Get huge.
They're and that's a big thing. I think it's interesting though, because what you said about the snakeheads, because snakeheads were blamed for everything for a long time, just like the common carp was blamed for a lot of stuff for a long time. And as it turns out, the opinion is very rapidly shifting to, actually the snakeheads have kind of just integrated into the area. They're not devastating bass. They're not devastating all these other species that were already there. But then in comes the blue catfish, and that seems to be the one. It's almost, it's almost getting the reputation of the zebra mussel. That when you see it, you're like, oh no, we're done. You got to get rid of them when you can. And once they're there, it's impossible. But yeah, you saw that though with the maybe you'll get the similar thing that the snakeheads got, because the snakeheads did get very heavily fished at the beginning when it was kill on sight, can't really, and now the states are saying, well, actually, you can release them. You just can't take them out alive. You can either take them out dead or you can release them. So maybe the blue cats will be the next one to get on that do not release list.
Yeah, I do know that the CCA is very aware of it. They're actually hosting a bunch of like blue cat or catfish tournaments now.
Yeah.
Just to get people aware of that these fish aren't necessarily one of the better invasive species, I guess, that the Chesapeake Bay has been introduced to.
Right.
So.
Well, and then people will realize, I mean, they are fun to catch. I like, the coolest thing about a catfish when you catch one. So, okay, I'm not talking the sail cats and the ones that they hate down in Florida. I get that. I get that. They shouldn't be in salt water. That messes with my head. I don't like that at all. But if you're out catfishing and they're actually hitting lures, I think that can be fun, especially when you have these big fish. Now, with that said, I don't want them there because they are really destroying these other fish. You have these fish coming up there to spawn, and you have these blue catfish in there just eating everything. It's not going to help. It's like we saw in New Jersey and Delaware, and well, really all over the place with the weak fish. And everyone said, well, it's the recreational fishers. No, it's the commercial fishermen. Well, if you look at any stats, it's neither. It's actually the seals. It's the spiny dogfish, which are protected for a while. I don't even know if they still are. And then the porpoises. All these things that were protected or are protected were destroying. And I think actually striped bass are now doing it too. But it's the same thing though.
Yeah. It's like I think along with the blue cats, not only are they doing some damage, but I think a secret, I don't want to say killer, but another one to me that I've noticed are these cormorants. They're those black birds. Ugh. The amount of cormorants that I have seen coming up, especially the Susquehanna River, they've completely killed one of the islands up there just from the amount of poop that they do on these trees and where the island is. I mean, it's completely dead. There's no growth on it anymore.
Yeah, because it's acid. It's like an acid on it. Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, they'll ball up herring and shad up in that river, and within 15 minutes, the entire ball that they've gathered I mean, you can see it. You can see the giant bait ball. And then these cormorants come in and completely wipe it out within minutes.
Well, they're protected as well, I believe.
Yep, they are.
It's protected. You got to be careful. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but I am saying that there are unintended consequences to everything.
Right.
And, I mean, think of it. It's one thing that we see on the coast, seals.
Yeah.
I'm not saying kill the seals, but I am saying that when the seals are around, the fish are not. They're dead. They're getting destroyed and they're getting run out of the area. Right. I had last year I was winter fishing, and just when I'm getting onto a bite of striped bass, I hook the first one, and then a seal pops up like 15 yards away. And they're gone. So I pull up and I take off, and I must have gone 2 miles, and I find more fish. And I start fishing, and as soon as the line's down, the seal pops up next to me. So it followed me around all day. So, I mean, I'd find the fish, and then I'd find that I couldn't do anything. It's like a dolphin following you around. It doesn't help. It doesn't help at all.
No.
All right, so we've got another question in here. I think this is an interesting one. This one's from Robert Rogers. Is there a difference with trolling speed in colder water temperatures versus warmer water temperatures? Any recommendations for speed over ground? So I guess right now, what are you looking at right now for speed over ground in the colder, I guess the low to mid, or I guess they're about mid 40s right now.
So in my opinion, like I said, I only do trolling like this time of year for these big fish. But I have noticed just with applying, this trolling technique versus when I'm fishing in, the end of summer, early fall, that speed definitely does matter. Right now I'm trolling or dragging pretty slow. I mean, it takes us a good 45 minutes to make one pass, upriver. And I guess the speed I'm going is like 1.5 mile an hour. So if, those of you who troll in the summertime or, in May, I'm not sure how fast you all troll, but I'm sure it's a heck of a lot faster than 1.5 mile an hour. And I definitely think the slower the presentation when the water temperature is colder, the better. Because fish are still lethargic. They're still, they're trying to conserve as much energy as possible. So when that water temperature is so cold, they don't want to be darting around, moving around as fast as they can, expressing so much energy, and tiring themselves out. It's kind of like a human body in the wintertime. Like you don't want to be shivering, freezing cold, expressing so much energy, and then you're dead tired within a couple hours. You don't want to move too much. You want to stay super warm, conserve your heat. That's kind of what these fish are doing in, these colder temperatures. But then when it starts to warm up, they start to get more active, and they'll, their first initial instinct is to want to find food.
Right.
And that's how it kind of gets, in the spring. And then also in the fall, when it starts to cool off, they know in their body and in their mind that, oh crap, it's these water temperatures are dropping. I got to feed. I got to find food and conserve energy. So yeah, I definitely think speed in colder water, slow it down. I always suggest that with people. They're like in the dead of winter, when I'm pickerel fishing, they're like, Kayla, I'm not catching anything. What am I doing wrong? Go slow right. Everything down. Slower the better. Like barely, a lot of people, they think like ripping a jerkbait through the water when it's 30 degrees outside, I'm not catching anything. I'm like, throw your jerkbait out there and barely reel it in, and they'll say, oh, I caught, thanks for telling me to slow down. So I think that's the biggest key.
I tend to be that guy sometimes. It's just going too fast. I went out fishing with Wyatt Parcell, one of the Salt Strong coaches, a few years ago, and I wasn't catching anything at all. And he was working on a slam for the day. And I said, Wyatt, are you going to tell me what's wrong? He said, yep, slow it down. I was like, I'm crawling. He's like, go slower. Mm-hmm. And wouldn't you know? And he's like, and I would just put a little bit heavier weight on there just to get it down a little quicker. And when I started catching immediately
nice.
On the first one. There's a guy that he comes on every once in a while on this stream named Chris Matusin, and he's striped bass and he does backwater marsh fishing from land. Mm-hmm. And I mean, talk about somebody who really thinks about what he's doing, plans it out, knows the conditions, knows everything. And he says repeatedly that he has a really, really hard time going slow. Mm-hmm. He's like, I'm just too aggressive of a person to go out there and just slow roll stuff around. But he can do it. It gets to him. It grates on him. But, it's the old saying, go as slow as you can and then go slower. Mm-hmm. And people don't believe that. But if you just let the current sweep the bait sometimes, you just keep the tension on it. That's what you want. I tell people at this time of the year, retrieve the bait. And now, again, this is not trolling or anything like that. Mm-hmm. You're casting up into the current and retrieve the bait at or below the speed of the current. Keep it in the strike zone as long as possible. It doesn't mean don't move it. Give it some little snaps, give it some jigs, give it some life, but you got to try to slow it down, which often means heavier baits as well. Something that'll get down there in the strike zone.
Right.
But one question I do have. So right now, I want to see if you're in agreement with me and what I've been noticing and telling people. At this time of the year, when the water is that cold, I'm typically telling people you're still, even though it's warmer than it was in the winter in a normal year, right? Even though we're about 5, 6, 8 degrees warmer in the water, I'm telling them you still want that deeper water. And that's where you're finding them, unless they're feeding and then they're moving up into the shallow areas. And then at that point, then you can speed up the retrieve. Is that what you're finding as well?
Yeah, I agree with that. Is especially like where I'm fishing. To me, I think it's deep water because normally what I'm fishing is like 2 to 3 feet of water.
Right.
But right now I'm in like 10 to 19 feet, which to me that's deep. I mean, granted, there's other people fishing out in the bay right now that are catching fish in 45 feet of water.
Right.
But yes, I definitely do agree with you, that right now a lot of fish kind of are staging in the deeper water while it's still pretty, I mean, it's warmer than average right now. Like still in years past, water temperatures were only in the mid 30s right now, upper 30s. It's 10 degrees warmer than that right now. So I still think these fish in their minds and in their bodies still feel like it's still winter. Like, granted today's the first day of spring, but, in their mind, they know like, wait a second, we got to hold up just another week or two. And then they can move, into those shallow areas and start feeding. And granted, I haven't seen any of the feeder fish like the herring or the shad yet up here. And I think they play a huge role into when a lot of these fish start, their process of what they need to do.
Absolutely. And we haven't seen them, up in Pennsylvania, the Delaware River, as far as I know. Now, people could be keeping it quiet, and I haven't checked on it on my own. But I'm pretty dialed in with a few guys who fish the Delaware River, and that's typically where I believe they come through. So if they start coming through the canal, that's where we know that, okay, they're in the Upper Chesapeake. They're moving in and out of the rivers and through the Delaware. I think it was Sean Kimbrough said that that's kind of the shortcut. Yeah, that's where the breeders come in. The big cows come in through that canal. Yeah. Which I think drives the people up in Philadelphia crazy because they're taking a left right before they get to them. But
for sure. Well, that's why they're all coming down here to fish when they can.
Exactly.
But
I'm one of them.
I agree. I mean, I think that canal a lot, especially a lot of these bigger fish in the Upper Bay. I think that's where they come through.
And there's some nice ones up there. We got another question here. We're going to change gears a little bit on this one. What are your thoughts on forward-facing sonar or fish finders in general?
So I don't really use a whole lot of electronics. I actually just got like side scan or whatever put on my boat last 2 summers ago. Right. And I'm still learning it. I do know within the Susquehanna River where I fish that side scan does not work for me, just because the current's always ripping through, and a lot of the spots and areas that I'm fishing within the river, I anchor up at. So when I'm anchored, I don't really get a good side scan view. And I do know too with like side scan that it has that little like ticking feature within it. I'm not 100% sure on how to describe it, but I know there's something within when you're running side scan that sometimes these fish can pick up that sonar. Yep. And they'll spook. So I personally don't have a whole lot of experience with electronics. I never have. Growing up fishing with my dad, we never had a fish finder. I mean, we did, but to be honest,
for finding structure.
Oh yeah. Well, and for where we're fishing too, like I said, a depth finder doesn't necessarily do us any good because, we're anchored up a lot. And there is a ton of structure where we're fishing. So we would bust a couple transducers off the back of the boat a couple times a year. So a lot of the times the transducer was just kind of hanging there and we would only utilize it for the water temperature. So unfortunately, I don't have a very good answer for that. And I apologize. But, if you're good at it and you can figure it out, some of these captains and guides that I follow swear by it. Yes. And they're incredible. Like I try to read up on it and I try to learn from them, if I ever have to utilize from it, which in some cases I do when fishing in the Upper Bay. I just personally haven't gotten it too dialed in yet. And I feel like once you do get it dialed in, you're golden.
Yeah. I mean, they can be amazing. I have side scan on mine, and I tell people, look, I don't actually use it to find fish. I use it to find, for 99% of the time or 90% of the time, I use it to find structure.
Yeah.
And where I fish, there's not always a lot of structure. It can just be dead flat sand bottoms. And the fleet's there. And then you get there and you're looking at it and you're like, why are you here? I don't get it. There's nothing here. So that's what I'm using it for. And I do use it for striped bass when I'm looking for schools of menhaden and things like that. That's when I use the side scan. Otherwise, I don't have a ton of use for it. The other time that I'll use it, I guess, is when I'm exploring the backwaters in the kayak and I'm going down channels that hasn't been mapped, that I've never been down, and I'm looking for some type of odd structure on the bottom that might hold fish. I honestly, they're called fish finders, but I don't use them really to find fish. I find the area on the maps before I go. I go to the area and I use it to validate the structure that I think is there. Oftentimes it's off by 10, 20 yards. But you still find it, right? And then I fish it. I don't really care. I think I catch 90+% of my fish without ever seeing anything on the fish finder.
Right.
It's not like wicked tuna, right? Where you hear the beep, 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 and then all of a sudden the line starts going.
Right.
That's not reality, right?
Right.
At least not for me.
If it was only that easy.
I know. I know. Well, a lot of people think it is that way, but
right. And some of them that do have this side scan, it is that easy. I mean, they'll be able to pick up, I know these guys have fished in the Lower Bay, drum fishing and stuff. They'll be able to see the shadows, and they're like, oh, cast, 50 yards off the left of the, and I'm like, how did you even know that? And here, everybody's bowed over with these giant fish. And I'm like, I wouldn't even know what to look for, when it comes to just open water.
It does take a lot of time, and it does take. You have to dial it in, so you have to make a lot of adjustments. And which actually is fun when you do that. I got mine totally perfect 2 years ago, and then I had to do a reset on it, and then I went through all last year because I just didn't want to do it again without it. And I was like, you know what, I didn't miss it. I caught just as many fish last year as the year before, if not more.
Right.
But I'm not the biggest fan of electronics, but there's a time and place for it.
Right.
Here's a question from James Flynn. Want to give a little bit of information of your business, where are you out of, and how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So, like I said, I primarily fish in the Upper Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. I actually trailer my boat. All I run is I have an 18-foot aluminum. It's a jet drive boat. So it's perfect for getting into super shallow water, skinny waters. I fish a lot of the tributaries in the Upper Bay. I do fish some areas in the Upper Bay, the open water, but only when the wind's not blowing, which is few and far between. So I've really had to limit myself to fish within the tributaries a lot. But I'm primarily out of the Baltimore region. And I trailer my boat because I go to where the fish are. If I know that there's fish biting in the Patapsco, I'm going to trailer down and try it out and see what I can find. Or if I hear that there's fish biting up on the Susquehanna Flats, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to search around and do my research and try to find where the fish are. And I guess that's why I love being able to have that easy access to kind of go wherever the fish are. And if you do want to reach out to me and get in contact with me, I do have my Instagram and Facebook. You can just search my name and it should be one of the first ones that come up, and my phone number, email, all that's right there on my bio, and you can reach out to me that way.
That's how I got a hold of you. I guess
social media.
Yeah, I guess I could have messaged you in the Insider Club, but I didn't. I went to your Instagram, followed you, and reached out that way. So let's get a little bit of this spring fishing. So again, most of Maryland and the Chesapeake is going to essentially shut down as we start to enter the spawning season. But we have a little bit of time left.
Mm-hmm.
Those on the podcast, listening on the podcast when it comes out, you might not have much time left. You may only have a couple days, but those on the live stream right now, you have a little bit of time. So let's say that you're going to go out and you're not going to be trolling or dragging, right? So what are the baits that you would be taking out with you right now? And what is the type of, well, actually, let's start off with, instead of the baits, what's the type of spot that you're going to be looking for? What kind of structure are you looking for? What kind of currents? What's a general description of a spot that people should be looking on the maps for right now?
So right now, if you're going to go out, I would look for areas within, that 15 to 20 foot range. You're going to want to look for certain drop off areas. And a lot of these fish are just going to be hanging right on these, drop offs, between that, 10 foot to 15 foot and then 15 to 20 foot. Those are the certain things you're going to be looking for if you're just going out open water fishing. I personally wouldn't be surprised if there wouldn't be some groups of birds working on some bait. I've heard some people out there searching for birds already. So those are some signs you're going to want to look for. I do know an outgoing tide can be more productive than an incoming tide. So that's something else that you might want to consider before heading out. Different baits that you might want to use are, I personally like jigging. That's one of my favorite techniques to approach striped bass fishing right now. And I always like the bigger baits. This is probably a cliche saying, but bigger baits catch bigger fish. And I definitely believe in that. So don't be afraid to throw those 8 to 10 inch, rubber baits. I also am a firm believer with paddle tail style baits. Some people might argue against me and think, the straight tail baits give more action when you're jigging, but I personally like the paddle tail style right now because, that water temperature is still a little cold. So you don't really want to be, snap jigging these baits super, super aggressively.
Right.
You want to be dropping these baits down, let them sink all the way to the bottom, slow retrieve them up, jig it once in a while, give it a little action, but be patient and be slow with it. I know it's easier said than done because, I'm anxious too, and I want to catch one, especially if I'm marking fish or whatever. But just remember, slow it down.
That's good advice. I want to say I'm also huge on the paddle tails, and a lot of people say to me, what about a jerk shad? I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. But the reason that I like the paddle tails, especially right now, goes back to what you were saying about the cold water. They're lethargic. They're not moving all over the place. They're not actively, well, maybe they're actively cruising, but it's a slow cruise, right, when they're moving. But the paddle tail throws out a vibration. So yes, you may have better visual action on that jerk shad, but the fish aren't going to feel that thump of that of a jerk shad tail, if they're 20 yards off. But they'll start to feel the thump of a paddle tail moving through the water. And that's one of the reasons that I think when you have cold water, so fall all the way through the spring, to me, that's paddle tail weather. If you want to go with the jerk shad, this is me again. If I want to go with a jerk shad, something with a straight tail, that's where I'm going once the water temperatures get into or above the optimal zone for them to feed, because now I know they're just going ham. They'll go after anything that they can see.
Right.
They're actively looking all the time because they're not in survival mode. So that's what I use. But what I do have a question. What do you think about adding scents to the lures at this time of the year? And then what's your general belief in putting scent on a lure that you're throwing out? I
am covered in scent this time of year. I don't know if I'm more covered or if my lures are more covered in scent. Yeah. And I always warn people too, before they get in my truck or anything. I'm like, okay, I just want you to know I did shower. This is the bait scent attractant stuff that I use when I go fishing. It's not me, I promise. I am a huge believer in scents and bait attractants, especially in cold water. I personally like to use, it's a brand called Smelly Jelly.
Yeah.
It's in a jar. I'm sure a lot of people use it. Procure too is another good one. But I like Smelly Jelly. It seems to last on the bait just a little longer, and it's a little more potent. I like the shad. It's the lime green color.
Yeah.
The shad one, because right now the striped bass, that's their main source of food is shad. So, yeah, anything with a shad based scent to it, load it up. That's what I always, and I'm talking like load if you have that slit up the middle of some of these, rubber baits.
Yeah.
Cake it in there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I use. I put I use the Dr. Juice a lot. And I also use Procure a lot. The funny thing is that I've noticed, yes, shad would be best, but I can never find shad at the shops that I go to. And for some reason I won't order them online. I like to just go, I like Amazon or something. I won't.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, any Procure actually helps. So whether it's shrimp, whether it's blue claw, whether it's any of it, because they eat all those. Menhaden's a beautiful one to get. If you can get that.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny you mentioned that your truck smells, because that's an ongoing joke in this live stream, because my truck is a disaster all the time. Even when it's clean, it smells like something fishy. Sometimes it's because a crab got out and died under a floor mat. But oftentimes it's because I put my crate from the kayak into the back seat, and I have scents I have like 6 bottles of scent in there. I have more scents in there than I have lures. And without question, at some point I'm not closing the top, and it's getting all over the crate, and then it's getting all over. So, James Flynn will probably make a comment about that, because he likes to tell me about but the stories, yes, I know exactly how you feel. It's not me.
Yeah, it's not me.
No, but I always feel bad when my family wants to get my truck. I'm like, I tell my wife, maybe we should take your car.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way. Yeah, I get a little lazy when I'm putting baits on, and I just end up like wiping the access on the outside of my bibs.
Yeah.
And then I throw my bibs in my truck, and it gets all over the seat and whatever.
Yeah, I might have to get a new, I was telling my wife, I may have to buy a new PFD this year. And they're like $160, $170. And the biggest reason is, she's like, why? Because it's all faded and everything. I was like, no, it just kind of stinks. And I washed it, and it's terrible. It's terrible. It's like washing a dog. It's like, it still smells like a dog after.
Right.
So, all right, here's another question that I want to get in there. Some great questions coming through. This one is from Minis and Fishies. Any fish on bridge pilings right now? So when you're targeting striped bass at this time, are you looking at bridge pilings as a primary structure at this time of the year?
I personally am not looking at bridge pilings. If there is like at the Bay Bridge right now, there's a rock piling. And there are some fish, schoolie sized fish that are kind of hanging on there. Just because I think there's some white perch that are hanging in there. But because I don't think there's a lot of fish on the actual pilings right now. One, the water temperature, I think, is just too cold, and there's not enough heat generated around them. A lot of the bait fish don't hang on there, because when the tide starts ripping back and forth, like I said, right now, these fish are wanting to just conserve as much energy as possible. So they're in certain areas where the water flow is not, super, super strong. And they're going to where the bait fish are. And I don't think the bait fish hang on the pilings this time of year like they do, like the spot and the perch.
Certainly not out in the main, like the Bay Bridge is a whole different but back up at the creeks, I would say you probably could get on, but there's still going to be smaller ones, but you might want to come off them and behind, at least into those current breaks, so that they're not fighting that current.
Yeah, I think you'd be better off, trying to find some of the bigger pilings, you know, the wider ones, like you said, that have better current break behind them. That's why I said something about the rock pile at the Bay Bridge, because behind that, there's quite a, you know, the current break behind that, some fish will hang around.
I was thinking about heading down there in the next couple of weeks, and then I realized it was running out of time.
Yeah.
I always I haven't fished there lately. It's been a while, and but you need the water to warm up a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really out. It's a bridge, but that's really open water.
Right.
There.
Right.
All right. Let's see. We had another one. Let's see. This is the problem when Ed's not here, because he's usually watching this. I'm trying to do two things at once, and I'm not the best at that. So let's do this, because I can't find that one question. So I apologize if I missed your question, people, but we're coming up close to the hour. We've got about 8 minutes left. A couple questions I wanted to ask. So at this time of the year, are you using any different gear, meaning just the rod, the reel, and the braid? Or are you keeping it consistent throughout the year? And if you're keeping it consistent, what are you using right now?
So right now I am using, it's light tackle, but it's a little heavier gear than what I use for like the schoolie size striped bass. Right now I'm using like a 7-foot. It's a medium heavy rod. And I'm using a 4,000 series reel with, I like between 40 and 50 pound braid. And then I use either a 40 or a 50 pound leader. Right now I've been using a 50 pound leader, because where I'm fishing, there's a ton of structure, rocks, giant boulders as big as my house, where these fish are hiding.
Yeah.
So, you know, I use this heavier line just so when we hook into them and there's a lot of current around, the first thing I tell everybody to do when you hook into one, hold on and start reeling down as fast as you can, because their first thing they want to do is take that bait that's in their mouth and dig you down into the rocks. And because of that, that's why I use the heavier line with a heavier leader, because once they get down into the rocks, all it takes is one swift swipe up against a rock and your line's broke.
Right.
And like I said, I use a 7-foot medium heavy rod and a 4,000 series reel just to give us that extra support and extra backbone, you know, to get dog these fish out of that structure.
Right. It's almost like tog fishing up here.
Yeah.
You got to get it out of there, because they're gonna dig, and once they dig and they get back into that structure, you're done. So how long of a leader are you using?
I use like a 3 to 4 foot piece.
Okay, so a short leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, I just use that leader because it's just an extra protection against these rocks. I mean, a lot of people don't like using a leader, and I can understand their reasonings. I personally have lost one too many fish just tying straight to braid, and right. I don't like that happening, not only because I lose the fish and then I feel bad because I'm like, oh shit, you know, here's a giant fish with a lure stuck in its mouth. So
right. Yeah. Yeah, it's never a good feeling.
No.
I want to throw this up there. This is a good one. So Rockfish Buster, who has a lot of good feedback in the chat for those that are in there right now, is validating your statement. They're not hanging behind those bridge pilings right now. So it's always good. Isn't it always nice when somebody agrees in the chat? It's nice to see that. But
for sure.
Here is what I think is going to be our last question. And I think it's a good one. And I just as a bit of background, Kayla and I talked about this before we came on, and it wasn't the easiest question to answer. So here it is. Another one from Robert Rogers. What do you target when striped bass is closed, or do you stay home? And that's the challenge. Again, Maryland has such wonky. Now it makes sense, right? Whether you agree with it or not, there's at least some logic behind. You don't want to catch the spawning bass, so I get it. But they do shut it down completely. So you're not even targeting the striped bass for quite a long period of time. And it's right when the big fish are there. So what are you doing during that time?
I'm sitting at home crying, wishing and praying I could get out. No, actually what I do in the month of April, because like Rich said, it's completely closed. The entire Chesapeake Bay, you can't target, you can't catch and release, can't do anything with the striped bass, which is fine. But I actually head to Pennsylvania and I fish on I guess it's like the midsection of the Susquehanna River. And I do a lot of smallmouth bass fishing. And that is one of my favorite pastimes come April and May. So, I head north and I head up on the Susquehanna River and do a lot of smallmouth fishing. And if the weather keeps up the way that it has been, I know later on in the week, it's supposed to be like 70 degrees again. Maybe by mid-April, the end of April, I'll start looking for the snakeheads because I do a lot of snakehead fishing too. So that's what I'll be doing come April. And then when the season opens back up for rockfish, I'll start looking for them again. But by then it's like June for me, right, especially on the Susquehanna. But even by then I'm full on snakehead engaged.
Yeah, that's one of the, so we were also talking earlier and I said, smallmouth is the one fish that I will really go out and target. And I always wanted to go out and target snakeheads, but it's so new to me and I believe I know where to find them, but nobody will tell you. Nobody wants to give up their snakehead spots. But man, I would guess that if people want to stay in the Bay area, it really changes at that, before the specs start moving up and everything like that. It's really a perch fishery at that point. So you're talking the white perch is probably going to be the biggest target.
And a lot of people too, and I totally forgot to mention, is the shad run. When the hickory shad and the American shad come in, that is an awesome fishery. They call it the freshwater tarpon or whatever in Maryland, and they're a blast to catch. So I'll be doing that too. There's a couple different options you can do when it's closed in April. So
yeah, it's not all lost. Or you can just come to New Jersey and fish with us and
true.
Get in on that run to Delaware also.
True.
Delaware doesn't seem to shut anything down ever. Mm-hmm. So there's always an opportunity to fish. I'll have to check and see if they have any crazy striped bass things, but for the most part, I mean, their summer flounder is open all year. Mm-hmm. They're very liberal with their regulations there. So that's always there. All right. So I think that was the last one that we have time for right now. So I want to thank you. First of all, Kayla, don't hang up. Just hold off afterwards. I want to talk to you real quick. Everybody, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. There were a lot of people in this one, a lot of people watching. I think this was awesome. A lot of great information. And quite frankly, we could have kept talking for quite a while longer, but we've committed to an hour and I tend to go over that. So I want to try to keep it as close to an hour as possible. Next week, I cannot announce the guest. We're working on that right now. Ed will be back. And there were some questions about where was Ed. Ed is preparing his gear for a Wednesday trip. And with his work, he has very limited time to get his stuff dewinterized and ready to get on the water. So I'm going to be hitting the water, hopefully with Ed on Wednesday. So anybody that's going to fish in New Jersey and is an insider, hit me up in the club. If you want to join, it will be a kayak trip. And it should be fun. And it'll be targeting striped bass. So we'll announce hopefully in the next day or so, the guest for next week. But if it's who I think it is, it's going to be a fun one. And it's going to be somebody that a lot of people have some familiarity with. So looking forward to that. Captain Kayla, thank you again for coming on.
Of
really
course.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight.
Absolutely. And everybody, you got weather windows coming up all throughout the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, all the way down into Florida, around the Gulf, through Texas. Find those weather windows and make sure you get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines. We'll see you next time.
'Cause fishing, it's in my